Welcome back, everybody. I thought it might be nice to put together a video to talk about peach leaf curl and what it does and how it works and how it can affect your trees, and most importantly what we can do to control it. I see a lot of folks on social media and things having issues with this, and it's a relatively easy disease to deal with, and so we're going to talk about exactly how to do that. So here's the thing. First and foremost, don't panic. I know peach leaf curl, it can look really bad. Like the leaves are all twisted and contorted and you're like, what's going on with my tree? And don't panic. It's chances are it's not going to kill your tree. It's not going to hurt your tree. If you have peach leaf curl really bad for an extended period of time, like several years in a row, it can weaken your tree. It can weaken your tree because those twisted, contorted leaves, they don't photosynthesize as good as they should. And so it can actually, your tree's not getting as much food as it should be getting, energy from those leaves, and it can kind of weaken your tree a little bit. And that can make your tree more prone to other problems that are more significant. Things like peach tree borer, the insect, that they tend to target weakened trees, and things like your bacterial cankers like Pseudomonas and Cytospora. But as a general rule, peach leaf curl in and amongst itself is not going to kill your trees. So don't freak out. Don't just go running out there and spraying it with whatever you find at the box store or whatever. Just let's talk about what it is and exactly how it works, and how we can control this thing effectively and efficiently, and just do it right. So here's what it is. Peach leaf curl is a fungus. That's all it is. It's just a fungus. It actually gets into the leaves and it gives them that twisted, contorted look. It's very easy to identify. Sometimes the leaves will look like almost like they have warts on them. They'll be growing weird. They'll probably be off color. Sometimes they'll be a lime green or even yellow. Sometimes even pink or red. So the color will change on them, and it makes the leaves look really bad. Okay, and this is how it works. What will happen is some of those leaves will get infected. Okay, you'll have a few of those twisted leaves on your tree, and then in the winter time or in the fall, when those leaves fall off of your tree, they land on the ground. Now, when the leaves fall off of a tree, they leave behind what's called a leaf scar on the branch, on the tree itself. Wherever that leaf petiole falls off of the tree, it leaves a little scar in the bark, just a little knock. Okay? Those leaves lay on the ground, and then in the fall you get some rain, and the fungal spores that are in those leaves, they kind of pop up with the moisture, and they can land back on your tree. And they really like to land inside those leaf scars. If they land inside those leaf scars, that's where they're going to overwinter, in that little knock in the bark. And then the following spring, when your new leaves start to develop and they start to kind of come out, that fungus actually grows inside the leaf. It actually kind of becomes part of that leaf as it's growing out. So now it's like an internal disease, a systemic disease. It's in the vascular system of the leaf. And that's why a lot of people have trouble with it, because they see these twisted, contorted leaves and they go, oh, we got a fungus, and they run to the store and they spray with a fungicide in June or July. That fungicide is not going to do anything, because that fungus is already inside the leaf. And applying a topical fungicide on top of that isn't going to do you any good. You're just wasting your time, you're wasting your money, you're spraying pesticides unnecessarily, because it's not going to be effective. The best thing you can do, understanding that those leaves that are infected, when they fall on the ground in the fall, they're going to reinfect your tree in the fall. So the first thing that you want to do in order to reduce your disease pressure is to clean up those leaves. Get rid of them. If you only have a few on your tree, go out there and pick them off your tree, and don't drop them on the ground. Pick them off your tree, throw them in a paper bag or something, throw them in the trash. Let the garbage men get rid of them. Get them off your property. By doing that, you're reducing the number of spores that can pop back up and reinfect your tree again in the fall. Okay, and then again in the fall, when the leaves start falling off your tree, go out there and do a good leaf cleanup. Rake up all your leaves, throw them in a bag, throw them in the trash, get them out of there. You're reducing your disease pressure for the following season. All right. Another thing you could do, even, rake up all the heavy leaves and get rid of them. If you get a lawnmower with a bagger on it, take your lawnmower, put the bagger on it, go out there and cut the grass all around your peach trees. It's like vacuuming your lawn, right? You just suck anything that might be left behind that you didn't get with a rake. You can suck it up with a lawnmower, catch it in a bag, get rid of it. Cultural controls. That's what these are. These are what we call cultural controls. Anything you can do to reduce the disease pressure is going to make the possibility of getting reinfected the following year less, which means that your spray applications will work better because they're under less demand to be effective. If you have the disease really bad, like I said, if you have peach leaf curl really bad on your tree, and especially if you have it year after year after year, it can weaken your tree. And if you think that's the case, or if you know you've had it for a couple of years, and you think that it might be, actually to the point where it is weakening your tree a little bit, the best thing you could do at that point is just take good care of your tree. Keep your tree healthy so that it's less prone to running into some of these other things like these bacterial infections or peach tree borer, things like that. And the way you can do that is simply, a nice mild fertilizing. Give it a good shot of maybe some fish emulsion or some sea kelp or something like that. Make sure it has all the nutrients that it needs. If you get into a dry spell, give it some water. If it's a newly planted tree, make sure it's getting enough water. Not excessive watering, but enough. And mulching, putting mulch around the base of your tree can be very helpful, especially with stone fruits, things like peaches and nectarines and apricots and cherries and plums and things like that. Mulch has a lot of benefits. I talk about mulch a lot in a lot of my videos. By putting a layer of mulch around the base of your tree, you're going to help hold in moisture, which is always a nice thing to do. As that mulch decomposes, it's going to create compost, which is beneficial to your soil and beneficial to your tree. A good layer of mulch can draw in earthworms, and earthworms get in there, and of course they're good for your soil. They can help aerate your soil, they can help fertilize your soil, and they have all kinds of benefits. But the big one, especially with stone fruits, I talked about the bacterial infections, things like Pseudomonas and Cytospora. They create cankers in your tree, and they can be a real bugger to deal with, and they could be a death sentence to your tree. The way these bacterial infections get into your tree quite often is through some kind of a wound on your tree. A pruning wound can open the door to a bacterial infection. A mechanical wound. Okay, things like lawnmowers and weed whackers, classic. You see it all the time. You go out, cut the grass, or your guys come out and cut the grass. They try to get that lawnmower as close to that tree as they can so they don't have to weed whack, and they end up putting a knock in the bark. Right? Now you're opening up your tree to a bacterial infection. Same with a weed whacker. If you weed whack, you're a little too hard with the weed whacker, you're not paying attention, you put a knock in the bark, now you've opened your tree up to these bacterial infections, these cankers, that are quite common in stone fruits. So specifically with stone fruits, if you want to keep your tree healthy, if you think it's distressed, mulch can do a lot, to keep the lawnmowers away, keep the weed whackers away, keep the moisture levels moderated, keep your soil temperatures moderated, and it can ultimately help to fertilize your tree in the long run. So I'm a very strong fan of mulching, specifically around stone fruits. Okay, so these are the things that you would do if you feel your tree's under distress. You want to keep your tree healthy. You always want to keep your tree healthy. It just makes it less prone to so many other problems. Now, we put all that aside, right? You got your tree healthy. You're doing all the things that you're supposed to do. You cleaned up all your leaves in the fall to reduce those disease pressures, because those leaves are going to throw those spores out in the fall and reinfect those leaf scars. If you get those leaves cleaned up before that happens, you're going to have less spores to infect those leaf scars, right? Now we're going to get into spraying. Some sprays that you can use. And I specifically talked a lot about this bacterial canker and such, because that's going to kind of come into play when we talk about spraying right now. The two most common and probably most effective sprays that you can use for peach leaf curl. One is called chlorothalonil. It's the active ingredient. It commonly goes by the name Daconil. You may have seen it in the box stores. A lot of people, rose growers, use Daconil a lot for black spot. Bonide, I think they call it Fungonil. It has the same active ingredient, that chlorothalonil. Daconil is very effective against peach leaf curl. Another one that you can use, and it's the one that I prefer, is simply copper. Okay, your copper spray, you can get them at any store. Everybody sells copper as a fungicide. It's organically accepted, so it is an organic product. Sometimes with these organic products, you can run into issues where they don't quite work as good as the chemical products, or maybe they don't last as long. They're more expensive, and organics are great. I'm a big fan of organics, but a lot of times it takes a lot more work to get an organic product to work. That's not the case with copper when it comes to peach leaf curl. Copper works very well at controlling peach leaf curl. Okay? Another big difference between copper and Daconil is that copper is actually a bactericide and a fungicide. Okay? Daconil is not. There's very few bactericides out on the market, and copper is certainly the most common. Now remember, we just talked about if your tree is weakened, it can be much more prone, especially your stone fruits. They can be much more prone to canker diseases, which are typically caused by bacterial infections. So if you use a copper spray, it's very effective against your peach leaf curl. It can also give you some potential protection against bacterial infections like Pseudomonas or Cytospora that can create more significant issues with your tree. So when it comes to peach leaf curl specifically, I'm a big fan of copper, because it has a lot of benefits to it. It's very effective against the leaf curl. It can give you some bactericide protection. It's organically approved, readily available, inexpensive. Go with the copper. It works. So, when do you spray? Timing is everything when it comes to spraying your trees. And understanding the life cycle of this disease, when the leaves fall off of the tree in the fall, and then you get some rain and the spores pop back on and reinfect your tree for the following year. Keeping that in mind, you want to start spraying when most of the leaves have fallen off your tree. When you get to the point where maybe 75% of the leaves have fallen off your tree, you go out there, you clean them all up, right? And then you're waiting for that rain event. Fungicides work protectively, okay? They're protectants. They don't cure fungus. Most of them. There are a few exceptions, but the vast majority of your fungicides are protectants. So you want to get them on before the fungus tries to infect your tree, which means you want to get it on there before a rain event. Okay? Because when it rains out, that's when those spores are going to try to infect your tree. So you want to go out the day before it rains out and hit them with that copper. And spray that trunk, that bare trunk that most of the leaves have fallen off of. Try to get as good a coverage as you can. So you're protecting those leaf scars so that when the rain comes the next day and those spores try to pop onto your tree, they won't be able to infect, because that copper is going to create a barrier, a shield, that's going to protect those leaf scars from infection. Okay? Typically, copper is going to give you 7 to 10 days of effective control. So what you want to do then is you put your copper out, it rains out, a day or two later, you have your protection in place, everything's good. You wait about a week, right? 7, 8 days, something like that. After about 7 or 8 days, you know that copper is starting to wear down. It's not giving you that protection that you need. So you're looking for another rain event. When's it going to rain out again? Oh, it's going to rain out on Wednesday? Then get out there on Tuesday. Do another shot of copper out there. Get that second shot of copper out there. It rains on Wednesday. Your tree's protected. The spores cannot get in there. You're golden. That's how you get your control. Usually 2 applications are going to be sufficient. Okay? Two applications at around a 10-day interval, depending on weather, that kind of a thing, will usually give you the protection that you need to significantly reduce, if not eliminate, peach leaf curl for the following season. All right? So if you have peach leaf curl on your tree right now, the best thing that you can do is, if it's reasonable, if you only have a few leaves on there that are infected, just pluck them off. Pluck them off and get rid of them. Cultural controls. There's no point in spraying a fungicide in June, July, August for peach leaf curl. You're just wasting your time. You're wasting your money. You're applying pesticides unnecessarily. You're better off just going and throwing a few burgers on the grill rather than spending your Saturday spraying fungicides that ain't going to do you any good at all. Okay? Keep your cultural controls in place. Keep your tree healthy. And then wait for the right time in the fall. Do your leaf cleanup. Get your spray out there with the copper right before it rains. Wait about 7, 8, 9 days. Get a second spray out there right before it rains. And chances are the following year you should have, greatly reduced, if not eliminated, the the fungal outbreak on your trees. And that's all there is to it. It really is a very simple disease to deal with. It's not an overly it's not like a deadly disease or a deadly fungal infection that's going to kill your tree. You just have to take the right steps at the right time of year. Put your cultural controls in place, get your sprays out there at the right time of year, and it's a very easy disease to deal with. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.